Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on the webinar today. My name is Charles Badger. I'm the Associate Director of Distribution here at Loftus Peak, and it's my absolute pleasure to be your host. Now, we have a really interesting topic lined up. It's called Understanding Artificial Intelligence as an Investor. Now, it's obviously hit the nail on the head with a lot of you because we do have a lot of people who have actually registered for this event. So a big welcome. Now, the way I thought we'd tackle this subject would be to have a talk to Anshu Sharma, who's our portfolio manager here at Loftus Peak, and two of our key investment analysts, Stuart Kennedy and Harry Morrow. Now, before we get underway, we do need to put a disclaimer, which is showing on your screen now. Effectively, it says that for any retail or direct investors that are watching this particular session, that we would like to take a moment just to remind you that we're not providing financial advice during this webinar. It is, in fact, general information only, and that we haven't taken into account your personal circumstances or needs. So for those of you that do wish to seek financial advice, we'd encourage you to go to either the ASX website to a section called Find a Broker or an Advisor, or to ASIC's MoneySmart website to a section called Choosing a Financial Advisor. And we will record this webinar, so that's available as a download as well. Now, what we want to try and do is give you a bit of an insight how investment professionals and experts such as ourselves look at this area of AI, how we ultimately tap into it, and how we choose from a global pool of stocks, choose those stocks that are adopting AI right now or maybe adopting AI fairly shortly. So we ultimately would include those in our portfolio. Now, it's fair to say that what Loftus Peak does not do is invest in startups or concept stocks, which may or may not work. We have a very rigorous approach to investing, and we'll explain that as we go through. It's fair to say AI is effectively disruption in action, and Loftus Peak specialise wholly and solely in disruption and disruption thematics. AI has really become mainstream fairly recently with the launch of tools such as ChatGPT and Midjourney, and there's a whole plethora of them out there at the moment, and we'll look at ChatGPT shortly as well. That certainly tipped the universities and schools on their heads overnight, effectively, and in terms of their having to rewrite their plagiarism policies, because a student can effectively write through one line of text an entire essay on a subject matter they have no idea about and don't know about. So it's very interesting. It's also really exciting as to where AI may be heading into the future. So we really want to drill down, have a look today at those that are early adopters, ultimately who the beneficiaries are going to be in this space, and where AI is heading in general. So let's have a chat to our team. So, Anshu, how's Loftus Peak actually exposed to AI and, I guess, high-power computing? But more particularly, how do you actually go about identifying those opportunities?
Thanks, Charlie. Charlie, artificial intelligence or AI has been an integral part of our portfolio since 2014 inception. Back then, we realized that AI would be extremely important in shaping the world of future. That realization hasn't really changed. That was the case then. That is the case now. ChatGPT has obviously brought AI to the forefront, the generative AI to the forefront, and a lot of investors are quite keen in understanding how to invest in AI. Having said that, we all have been experiencing AI for the last whole decade now, almost, in some shape or form. Within the portfolio, we have close to 65 to 67% of our portfolio having exposure to AI. What I want to talk about here is the 6 major thematics which Loftus Peak invests in. These are the thematics which we decided in 2014 are the areas of interest from which we'll try to get investment candidates to invest. Out of these 6 thematics, the 5 I'll discuss are the ones from which we are getting the AI exposure. Before I start that, I do want to talk about AI in terms of, for us, AI, the very basic unit of AI is data. It's this data or the data set on which AI or AI models train, and then they make decisions. So the 5 thematics I'll discuss now have a very major exposure towards towards data. The first one essentially is ecosystems and networks. These ecosystems and networks are getting bigger by the day. If you talk about Apple right now, they say they have close to 2 billion active connected devices on their network right now. So there's a lot of data generation happening there. There are some social media networks out there. So you actually are recording the behavioral response of people there, a very beautiful data set. You have business to consumer transaction networks, consumer to consumer transaction networks. So these ecosystems, these networks are generating a lot of data. The second part essentially then comes to data centers. This data has been generated, what to do with this data right now, then how do we get use out of this data? And the way they are using the data essentially is to, you analyze the data, you put a lot of compute power to it, a lot of grunt power to it, and you get some kind of answers from that, so some kind of use cases from that. The third thematic for us is connected devices or IoT or connected world. Again, more and more things getting connected, more and more data getting generated, more and more decision being made on the edge, on the device itself. So an AI application there. Fourth for us is genomics. Again, we all understand genomics requires a lot of grunt power, a lot of compute power, because there's so much data to be analyzed to make sense out of it and to get solution out of it. And fifth for us essentially is energy as a technology, not as a fuel. Again, the car of tomorrow is going to be more connected than the cars have been previously. As the cars get more connected, as the car generate more and more data, there would be more and more decision making which will happen on the cars itself or on the vehicles itself. That's our exposure to AI, Charlie.
So now let's look at the industries. What sort of industries are driving AI right now?
Charlie, we never thought about investing in disruption or in AI based on industries. Industry classifications are mostly backward looking. The way we thought about the world was essentially that each and every industry in the world will get impacted by AI, will get disrupted by AI at some point at some point in its life cycle. So we divided our portfolio into a different way. We divided it into tools, enablers, and beneficiaries. On the slide, you see a lot of names there. Some are tools, some are enablers, some are beneficiaries. The networks, the ecosystems I talked about earlier, that's where a lot of data generation and data storage is happening. Once that data has been generated and stored, that data requires compute power. That's where the tools, the chip companies, the semiconductors of the world come in. These days, one of the stock which everyone is talking about is NVIDIA, because that's the chip which will enable Microsoft to do all that generative AI compute power, or at least that is the assumption. So we have enablers which have generated data, stored data, tools which are analyzing the data for them, the compute power essentially. And then comes the biggest and the longest stage, which will be the beneficiary stage, where the real life companies start to see benefit of what has been done by the tools and enablers. In this case, if you look at Netflix in there, 80% of the recommendations which Netflix gives you are data driven. They are algorithm driven. And that's an application of AI. Similarly, if you look at John Deere, I think it's 8R tractor. That tractor is all about artificial intelligence there. So that's how we think about AI, not in terms of industries, but in terms of tools, enablers, and beneficiaries.
So, Stuart, if I can ask you, there's a lot of different definitions about what AI is. There are lots of different types. How do you summarize those types?
AI generally breaks down into two different types. The first is discriminative AI, where the system is coming in and making a prediction on data. This could be, for instance, a weather forecast, or it could be an ADAS system in a vehicle where driving down the road, something jumps out in front of the car, and the system comes in and figures out what it is. Is it a cat or a cow or a human being? and then gets the vehicle to respond appropriately depending on what it is in front of it. Hopefully, if it's a person, the car doesn't go and hit the person. Then we have generative AI, where the AI uses information that sits inside what they call a large language model, and it produces entirely new content. So a generative AI system could write a piece of poetry given the right query, or it could write an essay of a particular length. So generative AI is what has been making headlines over the last couple of months. First, with the release of OpenAI's ChatGPT to the general public, just to kind of play around with, and then Microsoft announcing that it was going to bring generative AI features to its Bing search engine and other Microsoft applications. And Google has its Bard in the background, B-A-R-D, as in Shakespeare, in the background, which it is talking about releasing at some point in the future. When we talk about these large language models, we're talking large. So the Chat GPT-3 model, which is what underpins OpenAI, that has about 175 billion parameters. GPTs of the future, there is a GPT 3.5 and a GPT-4. Especially GPT-4 is going to be very, very large. That could have trillions of parameters powering it. Now, this stuff is costly to operate. It's been estimated that on ChatGPT to service 1 billion queries a day, it would require up to $20 billion worth of NVIDIA GPUs. So there is potential fortunes to be made for companies that produce the silicon that supports generative AI.
Can you give me an example of a company that you would call an enabler and how it's actually involved in the end delivery of AI?
Here we were honing in on just one of our portfolio stocks. This one, AMD, could have jumped in on NVIDIA. Either, both have big exposure to AI. Most recent earnings call, Lisa Su, the CEO of AMD, said that AI is one of the largest growth opportunities for the company. Still in very early stages, but going to transform virtually every service and product, including their own. So the picture of that thing, the AMD Alveo V70, that's actually a speed up board for network transactions, which sounds kind of boring, but it can also speed up AI models substantially. And in particular, some of the uses of video analytics, customer recommendation engines, but they also play a part in very fast transaction finance. Things like hedge funds and so on are interested in that card for speeding up their transactions. Coming up from AMD is a new entrant for them. It's a thing called the M1300, which is an adaptive processing unit. So it contains a CPU, contains a GPU, and it is especially good at training big AI models. So kit like this is going to become more and more important as these LLMs really scale out. And the GPT-3 to GPT-4 example,
that has about 175 billion parameters
to 100 trillion parameters, good case in point. So this whole new world of generative AI is going to require some serious silicon grunt to train it, and also on the inference side to ask it questions.
Well, Microsoft seems to have struck a very big blow in the AI space with OpenAI. What are they doing exactly?
The takeaway from Microsoft's interest in AI is they're going to graft AI onto everything they do. The headline will be Bing and Edge, and trying to grab back a bit of market share from Google, and that's all very well. But they will use AI on all their stuff. And they've also talked about possibly, they said the software will become a bit more expensive. So they see it as being probably good for margins. But the capabilities that it brings, people will pay for it as a matter of course. Microsoft takes AI very seriously. We've all read about the massive investments in OpenAI. They whipped up a very special presentation, press conference, to explain a bit about what they're doing with generative AI and the Edge browser and the Bing search engine. So CEO has said, the first thing he said, the age of AI is upon us and Microsoft is powering it. For obvious reasons, Microsoft sees a chance to lift its kind of historic 9 or 10% share of the search business against the giant Google a bit, possibly a lot, by employing AI capabilities into Bing and into Edge. Compose, which is where everyone gets to do their homework in 5 minutes instead of an hour and a half, by getting the thing to actually compose answers to essay questions and so on. I think Compose is kind of the bit that we've already seen a big impact from in terms of generative AI. People making all sorts of predictions about it's going to take, writing will become purely machine generated. All sorts of things become purely machine generated. Obviously not, but a lot of it will be. The one I really like is that real estate agents are now finding that ChatGPT is kind of their go-to tool when they go to describe a piece of real estate, and it's kind of perfect for that, right? Because it doesn't have to be accurate. It can be very flowery, and apparently ChatGPT does a terrific job of creating real estate copy, so much so that some real estate agents are saying we don't care how much they charge for it, couldn't do the job without it. So Microsoft's interest in generative AI is not just Bing and not just Edge. They will put this stuff, I reckon, into just about every piece of software that they own. And they will use what they call, so we have LLMs, which are large language models. We also have SLMs, which are smaller language models. I believe they'll employ a lot of smaller language models to provide point capabilities to their software. Case in point, Excel. We know they're developing a small language model to tack onto Excel, which will make it much easier to parse and to correct Excel spreadsheet formulas. Now, just in terms of scale, the Excel small language model is about 60 million parameters, which obviously is a lot smaller and tighter than even GPT-3.
So, Stuart, is the price paid by Microsoft for OpenAI a fair one, in your opinion? And is the logic to improve Bing's share of search, or is it for other areas of Microsoft?
Search, probably top of mind in terms of their OpenAI investment. I think they said at the presentation that 1 point of gain in search generates $2 billion worth of revenue to them. So, there's an immediate kind of monetary impact with that.
Another point essentially is by becoming a cornerstone within that, you are actually able to direct the investments to a particular area. So obviously, that's just one use case on the search side. They would have done their projections on other things as well. 10 billion for them is a steal with authority thing, but that's the price they pay for kind of a tactical shift, which we are about to see, and how the data would be used and what kind of data could be generated. So in scheme of things, that's just marginal spend for them, $10 billion over. But again, I think yes. So just on search, that's a $2 billion number. And then what happens on Microsoft? Does the experience improves? That's another question for them. And then I think Harry, there was a point on Azure credits as well.
Oh, I mean, it's just around the investment itself, right? That $10 billion number, and I think the $1 billion that came before that. I think a lot of that kind of dollar comes in the form of Azure credits, because I don't know if you've been reading much into the cost of kind of training these models and then utilizing these models, but it's really grunt heavy, and it requires a significant amount of semiconductors in order to power it all. And so it's not necessarily a kind of a $10 billion cash investment. It's almost like you can use our cloud, and you can not necessarily use it for free, but it just means that OpenAI is on Microsoft's Azure platform.
Yeah, I think it also allows them to kind of get up close and personal with OpenAI. They talk about a thing called Prometheus, which is kind of their secret sauce on adding OpenAI capabilities to search and Bing, and allows them to. They're a bit vague actually, so I'm not quite sure what Prometheus actually does, but they're indicating that it allows a level of fine tuning around how the GPT-3 or GPT-4 large language model interacts with their particular software.
So perhaps I can ask this to all three of you. How far ahead do you think OpenAI is against its competitors, such as the one that Google released recently called Bard, which had obviously differing reviews in the marketplace?
Hard to tell. What it does tell us is that we're now in an AI arms race between Microsoft and Google, obviously, and other players. It also tells us we are going to see many large language models built over the next couple of years to do all sorts of things, and in kind of a good way for our portfolio, that it's going to require a lot of silicon to do one way or another.
And it's not clear. It's not that if Microsoft is getting shares, Google going to lose share in terms of revenue, because the TAM is expanding, the use cases are expanding. With the amount of data which Google has, it does have an edge on the amount of data which it has and which is generated, which it could obviously train better. So I don't think it's going to be that stark difference which we saw, let's say, in Intel and other companies, where Intel just kept on being left behind in everything. We don't think that's what's happening within Google and Microsoft. But to Stu's point, there would be a lot of iterations here. There would be possibly a news might come, Google is losing market share in search. So we will keep on looking at those stuff, but we are also aware that we are at the starting stage right now, and it's an expanding market. It's not a mature market.
One of the proxies a lot of people use is kind of the amount of research that these companies, and to be clear, the largest generators of AI research are Google, Microsoft, and I think Facebook. And there's a few universities in the mix, but I think it says a lot that these three companies are kind of in the lead when it comes to producing AI research. So Google's been investing as well. They've got they acquired DeepMind back in 2014, and Sundar has kind of he's been positioning the company as an AI company for the past 5 years. If you listen to any of their earnings calls, he will refer to the company as an AI company as opposed to a search company.
What sort of companies are exposed to AI that really rely on AI for their success? These are the ones that you probably call the beneficiaries. Which ones would they be?
So the way that I wanted to start this was not so much on the generative AI side of things, but it feels weird to say, but the traditional AI side of things. And that's just to say that a lot of the companies that we invest in today are beneficiaries of machine learning and artificial intelligence. So a couple of examples are up there. You've got Netflix's recommendation algorithm. 80% of what people watch on Netflix is a result of the recommendations that they receive. So there's obviously a material benefit in machine learning to Netflix in terms of user retention and acquisition. CrowdStrike is a endpoint cybersecurity company, and it leverages data across all of the company endpoints in order to proactively detect threats and then automate the response to those threats. And I mean, there's a couple of more there. Samsara is a connected cloud for physical operations. Vehicles, trucks, equipment, warehouses, all of it is becoming increasingly smart and connected. And what that means is that it's throwing off more data. And as you kind of create that data, you need to process it and come up with insights from that data. And that's kind of what Samsara is doing at their end. So, on the fleet management side of things, there might be predictive maintenance in terms of when you might require some fixes to the vehicle, route optimization, as well as driver monitoring, such as drowsiness and distraction. So a lot of the companies that we invest in today are already beneficiaries of AI in the traditional sense. But the point here, I think, is that, and this is what Anshu was saying before, as more and more data is being created, companies are leveraging it along with machine learning and AI in order to gain insights into their customers, into the business, to kind of create more efficient and better outcomes for everyone. So, and a lot of this, by the way, is happening in the cloud. So Netflix, obviously an AWS customer. A lot of this, the back end is the cloud, and the cloud is obviously built on the semiconductor companies.
Do you think, looking at from a cost perspective, do you think AI is going to be a big cost to a beneficiary type of company? And specifically, do you think AI will be justified for Samsara?
Yeah, well, so the beautiful thing about Samsara is that it's actually a cost out story. So one of the main products that they have at the moment is the fleet management side of things. So a lot of older vehicles require a bit of hardware that you can plug into the vehicle, and then it starts throwing off the data. But even with those costs and the way that Samsara charges, I think the number that they quote is that customers see a return on investment within kind of 6 months of onboarding and using the Samsara platform. So that's a really useful thing in the current environment as well, when you do have cost pressures, that just by jumping onto Samsara's platform, you can reduce the costs of your operations.
Anshu, if I can come back to you now, do you think AI is going to be a big revenue driver for, let's say, a couple of companies like John Deere and maybe Volkswagen? They're very different, but what's your opinion?
So I think on John Deere, the numbers which were there, by 2030, they want to have 10% of their revenue coming from software. That software comes with data which is generated on the tractors and on the harvesters. That data goes into the cloud, and so that they're generating 10% revenue. But a similar story to Apple, where software is double the gross margins of your hardware business. So profitability wise, that would be 20%. So that's quite massive. Volkswagen is a very interesting one. What we have done in the last 2 or 3 quarters, we have really skewed our portfolio, or we have increased our exposure towards automobiles, because we think market is missing this whole thing, which we are calling software-defined vehicle or digitization of vehicle. In case of Volkswagen, it's not the revenue upside for the stock. It is, can this company survive or not? Because we don't think the vehicle of tomorrow can be what the vehicle of history has been. Vehicles which would be expected in 5 years from now will have more silicon. There will be more data being generated, more sensors, more cameras. and the cars having ability to make decisions. That all is already happening, which we are seeing in the revenue of a lot of our companies. Even in this down market, automobile sector across all our companies is growing, and is growing at a very decent pace. Their projection is that amount of silicon, amount of radar, LiDAR, cameras going into the car are going from $700 to $7,000. When that happens, all that data gets generated. That has to be a sensor fusion in there. Then sensor fusion has to talk to the processing unit within the car. That processing unit then decides what's to be done. This is a very big misunderstood point. We feel like we think AI has a very huge application in the way cars of tomorrow would look like. And when we say tomorrow, this is not 15 years away. We are looking at 2025 as the inflection point in the ADAS essentially. And that is based on the models these companies have told, that these models and the kind of silicon engagement and the software engagement these companies are doing, and the kind of press releases they are doing right now.
And so you talked about AI being very important for the auto industry. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about that, please?
Charlie, so for artificial intelligence, we think the market doesn't really appreciate how much software and silicon which is about to go into the cars in the next 4 to 5 years. This industry has never focused heavily on the amount of chips or silicon which is going into the cars and kind of software which is about to go into the cars. And that all is kind of data driven. The cars would be more connected. There would be more data being generated in the cars. Once that data is getting generated, you require silicon to make decisions there. You require a software to analyze the data which is getting generated. What I want to do here is I want to play a snippet of one of the podcasts which we listened to a few months back, in which the CEO of Volvo talks about what part in the automobile industry is misunderstood by the market and which is going to be quite important for the future of automobile industry. And that kind of plays into the AI, which we are talking about. We think there would be more decisions which will be made on the car, in the car while people are driving. And that would be kind of the analysis of the data which is getting generated.
Welcome back. Here's our conversation with Jim Rowan, the CEO of Volvo. Jim, where does this podcast find you?
It finds me at my my desk. Actually, I'm in Asia this week.
So I'd love to get your sense of the state of play in the automobile market. And I realize it's an enormous market, but what is your sense if someone were to say, all right, give me the cliff notes on what's happening globally in the automotive market? What are the biggest trends? Who are the biggest winners, losers, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a great question because everyone tends to talk about this move towards electrification. And of course, that's true in itself. But electrification is really the tip of the iceberg. Just changing an internal combustion engine for an electrical propulsion system is really the easy part. The bigger and much, much more profound change is the move to core compute technology, next generation silicon, connectivity, cloud, and of course, software which can be updated over the air. And that's really the big change. And I guess if I put that into 2 words, the automotive industry has never really focused on software and silicon. And that really is the big change that's going on in the industry.
We kind of saw that in John Deere, how that company's gone up 3 or 4 times as they made their tractors and their harvesters more intelligent. I think for Volkswagen, it's not a question of what revenue generation is a survival question. If Tesla is doing what it's doing and it has a really good consumer experience, for us, all the cars of future have to be much more intelligent than they have been. And all those solutions are available right now. Obviously, Qualcomm is a very big beneficiary of that. But again, that is to the point of AI. We will have more data generation, we'll have more compute power, and we'll have more decisions being made on the device itself, on the car itself. So that's the way we're getting exposure to that there.
So ultimately, what's important right now? Is it tools? Is it enablers? Or is it beneficiaries? And how will that change throughout time, do you think?
The understanding or intention always has been to understand the cycle of disruption. The question we asked when this fund was established back in 2014 was that, is this a one-off Is disruption a one-off thing, or it would go for decades? And the answer was very clear that disruption is a multi-decade play in which few steps have, they're building blocks to everything. First the building blocks come into picture, then the buildings start building there, and then the services come in. So for us, tools are those building blocks. They are about 35-38% of the portfolio right now. Most of this is semiconductor, most of this is chips. These chips which are getting more powerful, they're getting less power hungry, hence there are more applications coming in the world right now. So this is about 35-38% of the portfolio, followed by enablers. These chips have enabled this big ecosystem. Just as a very simple example, if you don't have a Qualcomm chip or a Samsung chip, which was there in 2007, it's a different architecture than the chips which go in your computer. The chips which went to Apple phone were chips from Samsung or from Qualcomm. Those chips are less power hungry. They're not as powerful as the Intel chips, but they give you better battery life, and they are good for the mobile environment. Because of those chips, now Apple has 2 billion active users on its ecosystems. So these tools are enabling these big ecosystems. You talk about Azure, you talk about AWS. Once this phase is there, these companies have developed solutions for their own consumption initially. Now they're selling those to the beneficiaries, and the beneficiary stage for us would be the biggest stage. And that particular stage we think is going to be when each and every industry in the world will start seeing benefits. We already have Volkswagen in the portfolio. We already have John Deere in the portfolio. Eventually, what we think is going to start happen is tools get smaller, enablers get smaller, and we keep on moving towards beneficiaries. But that could be another 5 to 7, 10 years kind of journey for us to see which companies are gaining and then benefit from that.
So, Andrew, is Azure the main reason for holding Microsoft?
So for us, going back to the bigger picture of those 6 thematics we talked about is digitization. It's bytes and bits and data. AI is just an application of that for us. So Microsoft is in our portfolio for the cloud services. So yes, the data interpretation, the data generation, and then the data solutions. Along with that, obviously for the enterprise technology which Microsoft brings. But obviously Azure is a big part of that thesis for us. So it can't be. It's not specific. Just data center is the reason we are playing Microsoft. We obviously in Microsoft for all the other reasons as well. But this is a major driver for us in there. Microsoft is a core position for us.
The fund has a high weighting towards semis. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So what has happened when the reason we are higher in the tools is also the valuations have come down a lot. Market always treats the semiconductor industry as a cyclical industry. And what we think is happening in the market is within the semiconductor industry, there are 2 parts. To give you a bit of background, and I'll be very quick on that. The semiconductor revenue used to be about $100 billion back in 2003. By 2012, that was $200 billion. But this is annual revenue of the semiconductor industry. And from 2012 to 2017, that went from $200 billion to $300 billion. So the first $100 billion of increment in the revenue came in 10 years, 1 decade. Second one came in 5 years. And then from 2017 to 2021 end, that revenue reached $600 billion. So what we think is happening, the step change is happening. First phase was by PCs, second phase was a bit of PC, but mostly smartphones. Third phase is data center and smartphone, and the fourth phase is all these IoTs and 5G of the world. So when we think about the growth, what is happening, we think in the market is always perceived this semiconductor as a cyclical industry. In a cyclical industry, demand is high, and in good period, capacity comes up and the demand dies. And that's what they have kind of valued the whole semiconductor industry for. So what happened in our names is the revenues possibly have fallen by 10 to 20% year over year. But then that all growth is coming next year. So the way this whole semiconductor industry always works is it tends to look through those periods. So for us, the growth rates for us, the secular tailwinds haven't really changed. Most of these companies are in the range of, other than Qualcomm, most of our semiconductor companies are in the range of 10 to 15% growth rate in year 5. Qualcomm for us is in a compounded annual growth of about a rate of about 9 to 10% over the next 5 years. Those are our growth assumptions right now, to which we clearly see a path for these companies. And when we put these companies on those kind of growth, we're not talking about 50% growth, 30% growth. Those all would be surprises, and we would welcome those surprises. There is a potential of those surprises. For our model, most of the names, depending on which risk rank they are in, they would be in that category of 15%, 10 to 15% growth towards year 5. Within the semiconductor industry, there's a base revenue or a mature market, which is PCs, smartphones, and consumer electronics. All the new markets, we're talking about automobiles, data centers, IoT, these are still in the initial phases. If you just look at this ASML slide and the projections, what it shows is the highest growth area in semiconductors would be auto. So we are having a heavy exposure towards auto silicon for ourselves. We're looking at 14% compounded annual growth rate. These projections say that the amount of silicon which will go in automobile by 2030 would be bigger than the consumer electronics segment. So this is a very beautiful place to be for us, because the companies which were providing the chips for smartphones and the PCs are the companies which are providing the chips for automotive, for IoT, for data centers. So we think there's much more earning power, there's much more revenue sustainability as compared to the previous cycles. Hence, we have been heavily invested there. And hence, we think because of these secular tailwinds, we don't think the revenue number, the growth numbers which we have in our models are aggressive. Qualcomm, which is our biggest position, is just 12 times next earnings right now, price to earning. AMD is about 20 times right now. And AMD and I think Qualcomm is about 14%, AMD is about 7%, just because of that multiple differential. And then NVIDIA, which is 50 times most probably, that's a 1% position. It's a valuation question for us. Thing which has a high growth in it comes with a high execution risk. Hence, we reduce the weight. So all across the portfolio, things which we have heavier weight and won't have that kind of 50% growth rate numbers. Different names, different levels, but most of the portfolio is below 20 in terms of our semiconductor exposure over the next 12 months price to earning ratios.
Anshu, I see that one of the charts was sourced from ASML. That's the company that makes the machines, that makes the chips. Do we actually own this company?
On ASML, we exit the stock. We haven't re-entered yet. There's another company similar to ASML out of Japan known as Tokyo Electron. That is a part of the portfolio. The reason for ASML we didn't re-enter was essentially we feel like they have a capacity constraint. It's already running till 2025 capacity. It's already there. So it's already in the numbers. You can't really do much better than that. So that's already in the numbers. And we're also seeing some capex cuts right now. So we want to stay away from that, but Tokyo Electron is a smaller position, and on valuation that makes more sense to us than ASML. So hence we have Tokyo Electron there.
Well, we certainly covered a lot of ground today. Anshu, can you just please give us a wrap up of the key takeaways?
Charlie, we all have to realize that AI has been an integral part of our lives for quite some time now. ChatGPT obviously brings that to the forefront. It's the next evolution. It shows how integral AI would be in shaping the world of tomorrow. It also shows the pace of change within AI. And if that's a realization, there are two questions the investor should be asking right now. First, is their portfolio exposed to AI? And second, what is the time frame they have in mind? Is this a 1 to 2 months play, or this is a multi-decade play? Obviously, at Loftus, we have thought about this, that this is a multi-decade play, and the way we think about this journey is tools, enablers, and beneficiaries. We have to understand which stage is important at what point in time, which stage is commercial at what point in time. So for us, obviously, tools right now has the highest allocation, and that is because we think that is commercial right now. The compute power required to bring all these enablers to a scale have to happen now, and that's where profitability comes in. Once the enablers have the scale, they'll become profitable, and then the real life applications where you'll have two forms. First form in the beneficiaries would be the cost out story, or the AI models or the AI solutions being more efficient. And the second stage would be the new applications of AI in the beneficiary stage. That's how the Loftus has been investing in AI.
Well, thanks very much, gentlemen. I hope everybody found that a very interesting discussion today. Here at Loftus Peak, we constantly are searching the global markets in order to select stocks to put into our portfolio. AI most definitely is on the rise, but it's just simply one segment of the various opportunities that are out there in the disruptive space. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about Loftus Peak, please visit our website. The details are on the screen now. And don't forget, if you need some advice, go to the particular websites we mentioned before, which are the ASX and the ASIC websites. Thank you very much again for joining us today.